So you brought something interesting, because the next question of mine, which has been asked by our viewers, is to ask you and Sudarshan to take us through your funding journey and how your funding story has shaped up so far. And what is that you talk to your investors that has helped you to raise funds? This question has come from the upcoming budding entrepreneurs who wants to know, in terms of, as you said, you don't want to talk about it, but they want to understand how to raise funds on this front.
Yeah, I'll let Sudarshan take the first call.
No, okay, so funding, like it said, it's not something to do with celebrating because it's a day to mourn because I've given away a lot of my company in return. But also it gives a validation on that this is now the value. Otherwise, you really don't know what the value of the company can be. Also, it also gives a sense of validation to our employees who also give blood and sweat. Okay, that I'm a part of the company who's also valued at this much. But from a funding journey standpoint, I think one thing which is very clear is finding the right investor. There are multiple investors. The kind of investors we have on our cap table today, I treat them more as my partners. One of them is like my co-founder in itself. Literally helped me in building my MISs, thought process about how we should keep doing. Got me equipped with the right kind of leadership coaching for my entire leadership. More or less hired 50% of my leadership team as well. So it's a lot more that a VC should add and usually add, and that's what. While if I can say this VC is my third co-founder, it clearly is that's the amount of value they have brought in on board. So money, there are enough and more people who can take. It's very critical on who you take the money from because, like I said, it's about adding value, but it's also about how people are going to perceive you. You don't want a situation where your investors owning 70% of your company as well, because then people perceive you as a subsidiary and not a company worth investing because somebody else is always going to call the shots, right? So from a journey standpoint, if you have a large problem, be madly convinced about and have that conviction that I'm the guy who can solve for it. I think VC look at that more about your conviction of solving the problem vis-a-vis problem statement being there in the market, of course. It should not be a solution looking for a problem rather than a problem looking for a solution. Right? So that is one fundamental thing, and if you have that conviction, you might not have that experience. I was a lawyer prior to this. I was not into real estate buying and selling. I knew one side of law on the real estate side because that was, as you mentioned, 2/3 of the cases are real estate. So clearly that was what I used to do as well. But at least knowing some sorts of these things are critical, or having some experience, or having a team is very, very critical to do it. So one, you can raise your seed, but as you keep moving forward in your Series A, B, C rounds, it's very critical to build a team and give autonomy to your team. I think that's something which most of the founders completely miss out. That it's my company, so I should take all the shots. It's fine if your team takes the shots and makes mistakes, because Ratan Tata didn't build 1,000 companies if he controlled each and every decision making, or Reliance never became Reliance if Mukesh Ambani was involved in every money spent. You would make mistakes, but find the right guys who can learn from those mistakes and give them that empowerment that, hey, you go and take the shots. I think this is also a large perception about how you'll continuously keep raising funds. If you still have complete control of everything, you can never focus on growth journey. Instead, you'll be focusing on learning, right? So, understanding time value of yourself and finding the right partner are two more critical things, which at least I've learned in my entire fundraising journey.
So, in terms of overall mission statement, how far have you reached?
So, when we raised our seed round, that was a mission that, hey, we'll do 1,000 crore AUM in the next 5 years. We reached that very fast. So, as much as a founder keeps going deeper into the domain and as they keep scaling up, they have a new mission and a new vision towards something. So we've reached our 2020 vision, if I have to put it up today, which was our 2025 dream as such. But having said that, now we have a larger, mission and a goal to achieve what it is. So funding is definitely not what's solving. Right today, people talk about profitability. No one talks about, hey, when you're raising the next round, it's like, when are you going to be profitable? This is the new talk at least in founders conferences which we hear. But having said that, that has been our mindset from day one. Goes back to our roots of where I come from. Dhanda for us was profit minus expenses. Income minus expenses profit. Didn't mean what valuation is. At the end of the day, how much money are you making is what matters, because that's what you can build sustainable business over a period of time. Right? So at least that was there, luckily, and it came in the environment where everyone's talking about it, but that's been the DNA of every Marwadi Gujarati at the end of the day, right? That dhanda is dhanda at the end of the day. Valuations can come, can go, but if you're profitable and you're building a sustainable business, you can continue to keep scaling up to what it is. So mission will always keep changing as you keep evolving in the business, because it's achieving one goal after the other. And like I said, our intent right now from a mission standpoint is only very, very clear that why do we need foreign funds to buy all the Indian real estate where there is enough and more domestic money to also participate? So it's all about educating the right folks and bringing into this sector instead of anything else. And the larger, smaller, secret mission, which is very, very large from an India story standpoint, is why are you looked upon as China plus one and not why not China itself? Right? Like, why not be the large manufacturing powerhouse, and why not a second option?
Yeah.
Why are we considered as a second option? Why not the first option? So that's our right now mission, which is a 5-year journey. But I can't solve it single-handedly. I'm sure it's an ecosystem, but we build that ecosystem together.
I'm really interested to know, Sanjay, what was the talk you had with your investors while raising funds?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I love my cap table. I don't look at them as investors. I look at them as people that I want to work with that happen to be investors. That's number one for me. I think character quality matters a lot to me, and I get a lot. They're not only analyzing us, we're also finding out how much of a fit they are for us. And if they wouldn't have funded, I would have funded my own company anywhere. I was one of the largest capital, along with being a founder in my last company, allocated to my own company. I invest my personal capital in almost every single round, along with investors. I'm a strong believer in skin in the game. So I also sometimes look to see it's a great thing that so I come from the hedge fund world. Sometimes I also wonder how many investors are invested in their own funds.
Yeah.
Well, skin in the game. It's always easy to play with other people's money, right? And so that's one thing. But one, I love my captive. Everybody on there, I basically handpicked to be able. And after we got to a certain amount of capital, and I knew we were oversubscribed, I went out and recruited the investors that I wanted, right? And then these investors, in turn, helped me with all kinds of things, from hiring to talking about things like that. Like how to think about certain tactics and how to think about what the downsides of this particular decision are, what are the pathways. And so this is something YC also my partner in YC was Michael Siebel in my previous thing. He would say, form your Jedi Council. I don't know how many people are Star Wars fans, but basically there's a council that are like advisors. And so that's kind of how I look at forming my Jedi Council. That was very important to me. Now, coming to actual tactics, I have never spoken with an analyst, associate, VP, principal that has led to an investment. No analyst has ever led an investment. I would say it's almost a waste of time if you're a founder. And sometimes they'll say that, look, hey, sometimes a partner, is busy. We like to do the first round screening and so on and so forth before. And I'll say, cool, no need to talk. But they're also, it's a matter of like, we just want to respect the partner's time. What the think I'm doing? Like, I'm out here building a business, right? My time is valuable. And by the time you get to a certain amount, I'm also a capital allocator, right? My time, I'm allocating within my own team, just like you're allocating capital to other startups, right? At some point, you end up having more money in your bank account than their fund. So then how valuable is my time, right? And so for instance, like in the Valley, there's Benchmark. They have none of that. It's all partner-driven investments, every single. And the partner is really, really motivated to ensure that company succeeds. There's also solo GPs now that invest, and they are great too because they're looking at the founder quality and going on and so forth. So I would say like YC has been the best investor ever for us, and I think that's really important. I think second thing is also founders should probably, tactically speaking, go through phases where they say I'm either fundraising or I'm not. A lot of founders don't shut that off, and it's a distraction. Like I will literally say, this is my closing date, and after this, I will not raise more money, even if you give me a check, because I have to build. So, and when I'm building, I tell my team, this is fundraising time for me now. I need you to take over some of my functions and split it across. I'll still intervene where it's required. But fundraising is a full-time job. And it's a job of a CEO at early stage, CEO founder to do it. And I have seen founders kind of delegate that out to third parties. And I think part of your ability to raise capital is very important for a founder seat, no matter what it takes, right? So tactically speaking, in my experience, especially if you're a repeat entrepreneur, it's almost even disrespectful to say that partner can't speak with you and the analyst is the first screener. And it hasn't ever led to an investment. There have been 2 exceptional cases where the principal of that position really believed in us, but couldn't get their partnership to agree to a larger check in us, and then they put in their personal check instead.
Yeah.
Right? Smaller. That means a lot to us, right? So that's number 1. Number 2, either have a discrete time zone when you're fundraising and when you're operating. Do not make it a continual fundraising cycle, right? And number 3 is like, be in the mindset, whether they give you money or not, you will still build it. Otherwise, a business is not building in itself, right? Fundraising is not a milestone. Yes. And so that's just the mindset that you probably have. It's more to do with mindset than what investors think and want. Sometimes it's bad luck. They don't see it. Just keep building.
So Ashish, at what stage Propsoch is right now in the funding? Are you guys planning to raise funds?
So we actually went through this initial frenzy that, let's raise funds and, we'll be secure for 20 months, 24 months and all that. But like what you rightly said, right, it's a full-time job and it just takes your mind away from what you want to build, right? And since we were very small and we just incorporated 9 months back, right? I didn't have the bandwidth to actually keep chasing funds. And the questions they were asking me was, so what have you built? How large is your team? Show us your tech. Then I realized if I keep running behind them, then how will I show them this? So then I decided to solve this problem, and that's what we're doing. And hopefully after March, once we have actually put all this together. And the second thing which we are also chasing is a credible PMF story, right? So that it's not just anecdotal where we say, hey, 1 guy paid me, 2 guys paid me. We want to be like a very strong market fit where people are coming to us naturally, not because I'm spending 2 rupees to get 1 rupee of business. Once I reach that stage, I would actively actually switch hats into this whole fundraising thing. Meanwhile, a lot of people know me because I've been in the industry for long. So my biggest supporters have been my angel investors, Mohit Malhotra, ex-CEO of Godrej, Lalit Makhijani, the Chief Marketing Officer, right? So, people like that are always there to help out. So I can just focus on building the business. And they don't come with those questions like, what have you done? What are you... they understand the market, they understand the business, and they know the gap, right, which we're solving for. So, so that's where I am on the... that's my focus when it comes to the current time period. 3 months down the line, probably we'll just...
I was just saying one more thing I forgot to add that's probably very important is the amount of time chasing funds that are slow moving. It's better to have industry experts and angels that can drop a smaller check. You don't need a lot of money today to build a company. AWS, makes it, server costs are super low, bunch of no-code tools. Because I also angel invest. I just look at, how they're shipping product. The longer it takes to ship a product, the less likely it's to succeed or not get launched at all. And that comes down to the founder, right? So that's just the one thing. Like, go after angels first, people that you think can add value. Don't be like disregarding about 10L checks or 20L checks and things like that. We found those guys are actually the ones that care the most and add tons of value.
And they talk about you.
Yeah, they talk about you, right? You mean a lot to them and they mean a lot to you. It's not the size of the check. It's like when they came in, that matters a lot. So, yeah.
So when they came in, this is like a very important even question and thought from the entrepreneurs. Do they start from the idea stage concept level to raise funds, or would you suggest that they should build the company for a year and show the numbers and then raise funds?
So I look at a lot of investors, and I think if you can encapsulate down to a single concept, it's a leap of faith. What I mean by that is people that have achieved it before, it's easier for the investors to take that leap of faith that this guy's going to accomplish what he's saying.
Yeah.
And so, some people call it pedigree, some people call it this, but like if you actually look as a repeat entrepreneur and they've seen you do some things, next time you do it and you're drawing out the story for them about what you want to build, then you're forcing the investor to take a leap of faith on you that when you have nothing. But if you've already done it before, it's easier for them to make that leap of faith, right? Your body of work makes it easy for you to kind of paint that story, make it believable, your ambition. And it also has to do with optimism of a particular society. Like you have trust deficit societies and things like that. Like you rightly mentioned one point that the VC asks, why can't I do this? And why the hell aren't you? Right? Like, why aren't you doing it? Right? But it happens in India, right? It's a lot more common. We see a bunch of analyst associates coming out of their fund now, starting their startup, getting funded by their old fund, a couple million here or there. And, it's almost like some VCs are self-replicating themselves in the format of a founder now, because they found that can also be profitable to do so. And then you're surprised when founders sell secondaries at Series B, Series C, Series A, right? You care about corporate governance. Why the fuck did you allow them to sell at Series A, B, and C? Skin in the game. Probably, if you don't understand the concept of skin in the game, you're most likely a management consultant in India, or you're probably don't have your own money invested in the fund, and you have other people's money. And even if you do succeed, not you succeeded because it's despite you not having that, you still succeeded. And that still goes to the founder. So instead of thinking about ourselves as picking winners, like talking about corporate governance and all of this, at like early stage, people will say there are no numbers to view. But when things go wrong, if you blame a founder, at early stage, all you had to do was trust the character of the founder. And if he did something wrong later, your job is to pick great founders at early stage. If he did something wrong back then, it's not the blame of the founder. You have to go back to the source of the funding, right? And like the second point is then you allow them and engage, and allow them to engage in source of behavior, Series A, B, and C, like sell secondaries. And they become indisciplined. Like a lot of founders over time, for some weird reason, you're also able to see that they become less fit. They become, from when you first see them to where they are today, they start to have a certain lifestyle. And that is all about, and this is something Paul Graham also talks in one of his favorite essays. It's about anatomy of determination. Sometimes you have an inborn will to succeed, but a lot of how you end up being is also about what you choose to say no to. And it becomes extremely difficult for a founder to say no when investors are along with, in the party too. So I don't think we can hold them accountable. I think the founders probably need to hold it accountable themselves. That's why it's especially important how your cap table is constructed and how participative that is. And when people you're not holding yourself accountable, are the people on your cap table blaming you after allowing you to do certain things? Or have they been telling you ahead of time, even when the times are going good, that, hey, you can do this better? Those are the people that we want to have on board. Not allowing you to engage in behavior and being okay and talking you up as you raise each subsequent round, only to be thrown under the bus much, much later.
So Sudarshan, correct me if I'm wrong, so in PropTech, why specifically PropTech, we have seen how the growth has been in EdTech, health tech and everything. So in PropTech, if early stage funding someone wants to raise, do they have to have the pedigree background, or they can convince the investors with their idea, or what would you advice, take a year, build your business, show the numbers, and maybe then you can raise funds?
So I think it's a great question. Two ways to look at it. See, when you're raising money, you also have a fiduciary responsibility to take money for them, right? As that you take the money, play with it, go for a holiday or whatever, right? So it's about you have a fiduciary responsibility. I think it's very important that founders understand that. Many founders don't, and they just burn out the entire money, right? With the ambition that, hey, I want to be a cool guy more than anything else. And he brought up a point that, the founders have a different lifestyle in itself after they raise funding. I've heard multiple founders go and buy fancy cars, etc., etc. Point being, while it's fine, you do it, it's one's choice, but understanding the fiduciary responsibility is more important. So if you think it's an idea, but before you don't have solved even 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cases before you say, okay, this is a large problem and I'm happy to solve that, and hence I'm looking at raising funding, is when you should. Consider when you're raising money, imagine you're borrowing money from your dad to run the show, whether kisi aur ka paisa ho, ghar ka paisa ho, end of the day, money is money. So if you're taking money, you have the responsibility to give it back also, right? So founders, like you said, I have a cutoff that I can raise even 10 more million, but also don't need that money. I'm not building to raise, but I'm raising just to continue building, right? So that is very, very important. So I think fundamentally, if you have a PMF, in my opinion, like how he's thinking about at Propsoch, that let me build a PMF while I take smaller checks from investors who are more like partners, who are giving me the right advice on how not to screw up. I think that is a larger investment in itself. Like, for instance, one of our investors who invested in multiple Proptechs in the past gave us a real dope about how not to screw up, how not to do things, because their other portfolio companies spent years building that and then realized that it's not worth it, right? So that insight, that learning, that conversation connect with that portfolio company of theirs, that founder, gave us such a great insight that if you could come here, it's also because of those guys who made us understand that, hey, this is how the whole world operates, and they failed. You operate perhaps this way if you want to, but at least don't go this way, because this is not a means to your destiny at the end of the day. So these are certain parameters. So initial funding from mentors, I would say, more than anything else. If it takes for you to give free equity, it's worth it because their time is a larger investment than actual money. And just be frugal, right? I mean, you don't need money to solve everything. Frugality is also a way everybody has solved and build things up. So PMF, in my opinion, is critical because at least you then know that ye dhanda ban sakta hai, right? Otherwise, people have flamboyant ideas, want to do everything. Somebody wants to serve food from here to space also. But is this even a problem worth solving? Why don't you serve one meal first, figure out the cost if people are ready to pay, and then probably go out and raise money to continue solving for multiple other areas.
True. So Ashish, while going through meeting all these investors, have any investors given you good insights how to not screw up, as Sudarshan said?
Investors who are already on board, or the ones who are
Already on board.
Already on board, I think. So the people who've come on board in my angel round, they are not from the startup ecosystem, right? They are from the corporate ecosystem where I came from, right? So they give me great inputs on how to go about building your team. They give me a lot of good inputs on what are the gaps that they have seen, because while I had a certain perspective on the market, from their positions or their roles, they had different perspectives, right? So they give me very good inputs on that. But when it comes to how not to screw up when you build your startup, I just go online and I watch everything that I can. I speak to a lot of people. I have a lot of good friends who have built their companies, exited successfully, or are still in the journey, right? So I gather as much information as possible, right? And being a slightly older founder, probably compared to both of them, I also play it a little more conservatively, right? So I try something, I test it out, I see whether it's working or not, and then I try and build that up. Even when it comes to hiring, I'm being extremely slow intentionally, because there's no fun in saying I have a 50-member team, right? When I don't know if I can pay them after 6 months, right? So it's better to take that slow. So these are a lot of things. So it's a mix of, my background and my own experience in managing teams and working in a good. End of the day, every corporate was a startup at some point in time, and within corporates, we have startup cycles, right? So, like when I was at Godrej Properties, a 100-year-old name, right? But they had a huge startup cycle from 2010 to 2015-16 when they started going aggressive pan India, right? you learn a lot from that. You realize, what works, what doesn't work, how to pitch, how to leverage brand, how to leverage money, how to leverage individual expertise. So yeah, I'm using all that, and right now I'm growing this thing. But follow a lot of thought leaders in the startup space because there's no limit to it, right? Yeah.
So last question I'll bring from the funding segment. In the recent conversation I had with No Broker Amit Agrawal, I asked him, a lot of PropTech entrepreneurs also have shown that grievance that if we go for raising funds, every investor look in the way does this model exist in China and US?
Yeah.
Is it an already existing model you're running off with in India? If yes, then they are ready to bet. If not, then it's very hard for them to convince, this is how I want to expand the business, or this is how I want to bring in numbers or the customers. But they feel they still face certain problems. It's not a Me Too concept. So what is your take on that, Sanjay?
I mean, there's something we again used to learn in investing management, which is like history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, right? Like you do need to have some kind of frameworks that you need to operate by, and obviously you pick up some things that have existed. You don't need to reinvent the wheel in everything. As a founder, there's already enough stuff that you're dealing with and inventing. There are some established protocols for some certain divisions that are built. You don't need to rework that whole thing again. Now, when it comes to like investors and what they're seeing, whether they're saying that there's a model equivalent to US and China, like when they say no, this is again something Michael C from YC says, trust the no, not the why, right? They can give you all kinds of explanations for why. And you shouldn't even expect that out of them. Like if they give it, great. If they don't respond to your emails, that's fine too. And sometimes they won't, right? That's just how they are. So signal for you next time they come to you and want to give you money. And in terms of investing themes, we've seen a lot of Indian parallels being built using US and China models. I would pause it and say, how are they doing? Right? A lot of data speaks for itself. And so whether it's retail, whether it's fintech stuff, like how are they doing so far in India?
Yeah.
Right. TCS seems to be doing fine. Infi seems to be doing fine. Basically, they're using the lower labor costs in India and selling to US markets. That's a great business in India.
Yeah.
Right. Take India's advantage and get revenue in dollars seems to be the working mode for majority of the companies, including Reliance here, Sun Pharma, a lot of things. Like, what does India have as an advantage that's unsubstitutable by other countries? One example of that, like when you're looking at even in India, is like spices. Like China cannot out manufacture you in spices. China can beat you in almost every single way when it comes to tangible production, manufacturing. Like bar none. There is nothing you can say India is more competitive than China in when it comes to manufacturing, including cost of power per kilowatt, right? So that means you look at stuff that's unsubstitutable in India and how you use it as an advantage to sell maybe to other markets. But to draw parallels from US and see if that can be replicated in India sounds like a very McKinsey thing to do, right? Sounds like a very top-down way of looking at things. I try to preach within my company, and something that the way that I think about something you also get from epistemology is like source of knowledge. Like from the bottom up approach is a far superior way of thinking through your plan. And sometimes maybe that ends up, being similar to a Western counterpart. But by no means am I looking at a Western counterpart and I'm saying this is what needs to be done. Because if I'm building Landeed that way, this doesn't exist in US.
Yeah.
And who believed in us more than Indians? Indians outside of India, or black, white people, right? Believed in us more than sometimes even Indians. We have a very ingrained sense of following status quo and saying this is a trust deficit, this is a high risk market, this is something we should penetrate, this is something we should take a veil off, and then we celebrate why so many Indians leave the country and are CEOs of other companies without wondering why the hell they're not here? So the ecosystem needs to be built around that. Never trust an investor that like wants to look at India, like American equivalent of it in India. We are a sub, like 60% of India lives on less than $2 a day. There's literally no software product you can build for them, right? Nothing I can build today, and I'm very cognizant of that. And like there are, and a lot of the business that you see in India that are successful are taking the India advantage and getting revenue in dollars. Still today, but that doesn't mean like you get the consumers used to free stuff. Make Indians pay. Make us pay for everything. Like that's what we do. If they don't pay, like again, make people speak with their wallets. Let them vote with their wallets. And that is a great way of really knowing whether the market wants something that you're building or not. Like people ask, like, how do you buy trust? It seems to be like in India, you buy trust by discounting, which is a very paradoxical thing to say, right? But yeah, so like pedigree, all of this doesn't really matter. It only so matters because that's what a particular locality here believes. And if that locality is not working for you, you have two options. Find a way to get out of that locality. Or two, build a product that nobody can say no to. I could not do this latter. So I chose to go with the former. I found a locality that does believe in what we're doing, that believes in me. And for most of the investors, when they put in the money, like I send them my core principles. If you align with this, I will take your money. If you do not, we will not get along. And I'm happy to buy you out. So that's generally the principle we follow. If somebody wants to get out, I'm like, great. Awesome.
So Sudarshan, when you had entered the market, you were the first and the only player in the fractional ownership. And now we are seeing more players coming into it. But you were the one who broke that barrier for Indian market. And now the other players are able to easily raise funds because the investors have seen Strata ke saath kya hua tha and how it's a good profitable business. So do you think this works when it comes to raising funds, that if you're a Me Too concept and you'll be able to easily raise funds because there's already functioning models or the companies which you can see their P&L and everything, or like No Broker was the first company in India where even in global market there was no model like that. So what is your take on that?
Oh, honestly, a very, very interesting question. We hear from a lot of, in fact, one of the VCs called up to do a ref check about our business to invest in another company. Like, what are you even thinking of this? Right? But having said that, I mean, to me, it is more like an accomplishment that an idea is now an industry when people are taking us as benchmarks, which means I really need to upgrade my benchmark better because they're not as low as what people can think. Our capabilities are far better. But having said that, this is a problem that even if there are 5-10 companies, still it's too large a problem to solve for, right? So I'm glad that this is there, number one. Second, I'm spending marketing dollars. Now I see that if there are 3 other companies, I know I'm going to win. I'm going to beat them out overnight. I'll be a monopoly trade over a period of time. So I'm just seeing somebody else is putting money and educating the market and creating an industry for me. I'm very happy if more Me Too's keep coming because they're going to keep spending more and more money and educating the market. That's my biggest take. So I really promote more and more companies coming into this domain. And also I think awareness will eventually spread to investors who are deploying capital with us. Our retail investors will keep deploying that. It's not about the asset I'm going after. It's also about the asset manager's capability to manage the asset for me, right? What if your asset manager doesn't exist tomorrow, right? So that's also very, very critical, which smart investors do understand. You can take them for a ride once as a new player. Like some people trusted us. So I'm sure people will continue trusting us. But we are very clear, we want to be the Gundas of this market. We will outbeat everybody with our speed, with our execution, with the vision, with the tech capabilities which we built. But like I said, I'm just glad that people keep us as benchmarks. So I think we need to upgrade, number one. And second, I'm glad that people are spending more and more money to educate the market, which just helps me bring my CAC cost down drastically.
Ashish, what's your take on this? On this Me Too concept, is it easy to raise funds on that area, or idea of stage where there's no business running, even in global market? There's still a certain kind of difficulty in raising funds.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's easier to raise funds when you are a Me Too concept, right? If the problems are similar in both the countries, right? The problem is when you take a solution which worked for the US and try to put it on India, and India doesn't even need that solution. then you're in trouble, right? You might be a Me Too, you might be a great Me Too, you will have the entire user experience replicated. But if no one wants it, then what are you going to do, right? The other way to look at it, India's problems are very unique, right? Maybe a few developing countries in the world will probably follow India. Like India could be the US to those countries for the solutions that we create here. So one is there's a lot of domestic demand, right? Which especially in real estate, you don't really need to be a Facebook where you need to go global, right? Here, when you talk about PropTech and real estate, the demand is crazy. And like he rightly said, people, the majority of the population is, they can't even afford anything today, right? But there's a huge middle layer which is very aspirational, right? So while we are all building products today for the top 1% of India's people, that middle layer is aspiring to go into that space, right? And that 1% will become 4%, 5%. Now, that itself is like a crazy amount of growth. So why, waste your time trying to create something which worked in the US, which might not even work here? Just solve for the problems here. And as you keep solving and people see value, then the money will come in. It's not that big a deal. But yeah, I've been asked this question, like, I think you asked me that when we came in. Right, so I gave him an equivalent. I mentioned MLS, but honestly, we're not building MLS of India. We're doing something else altogether, right? So, yeah.
Got it. So, panel discussion.